I've been pretty clear on my channel that as far as Remake, even though for a lot of the time I found it fun to play, I fundamentally disagreed with the storytelling choices Square Enix made. My partner was left so dispirited by Remake that she felt rewarding Square Enix with more cash was the wrong thing to do, and that made sense to me on some level. If I truly disagreed with what Square Enix had done, then to keep chucking money their way might amount to a certain level of hypocrisy on my part. After all, beyond making YouTube videos that the developers will never see, hitting Square Enix in the purse is the only real, yet small voice I have. I'd be interested to hear your opinion, but ultimately I started this channel to talk Final Fantasy, and for better or worse I want to be able to still talk about it. So I had resolved to playing the DLC, but I wasn't in a major hurry. Once the game arrived on PS Plus Extra, I guess I took my opportunity. So, it's done. I've played it, twice. And as you'd expect, this video contains full spoilers. I had little knowledge of this game going in, other than watching the trailers and the final cutscene with Cloud and gang some time ago. I have no idea how the game was received by other reviewers. So what the hell is Intermission? It's a DLC story featuring the girl from FF7 who likes to steal your materia, except now she's got a beefed up backstory, which by game's end, installs in her a thirst for revenge, and I guess an impetus to hang out with more spiky haired dudes with big ass weapons. If I could describe the story in a paragraph, Yuffie, a ninja from a far off land, enters Midgar with her eyes locked on an ultimate materia housed in Shinra HQ. In the Sector 7 slums, she meets up with her countryman Sonan. After obtaining key passes from Avalanche, the Avalanche, not that weird spin-off bunch who go around bombing reactors and doing things consequential to driving forward the story, I mean the real Avalanche, Yuffie and Sonan infiltrate Shinra's home soil. In the corridors of Shinra, they cross paths with Scarlet, head of weapons development, who exploits their ninja prowess to sharpen her robots and gadgets. Yuffie and Sonan come looking for an ultimate power, but their resolve is put to the test when Scarlet unlocks the monsters in Shinra's basement, revealing a darkness that our heroes are not prepared for. That's the gist. Yuffie is tolerable as a character, dare I say likeable. From the trailers I had misgivings about her English voice, but I think the voice actor does a great job of what she's asked to do. I still think it would have been a good opportunity for the Wu-Tai characters to have their own accent, pitting them as the outsiders. Instead of having the likes of Aerith, Tifa, Yuffie and most NPCs all sound so generic American.
You asshole! My stomach's in knots. Is it though?
I think that would have helped with world building. Don't forget that there's a huge distance between Midgar and Wu-Tai. It would have been cool to me if the differences between them went beyond "we do ninja things" over in Wu-Tai. On the subject of Wu-Tai, in her very first scene Yuffie sets up her own backstory in a monologue directed straight to camera. It's kind of an awkward way of delivering exposition, but it somewhat works by highlighting her arrogance in the process, and creating elements of comedy as she fails to attain the red carpet or hero worshipping scenes she no doubt visualised in her own mind on the way to Midgar. By the way, I really hate this trend of having characters sing FF fanfares or hum their own themes. It's another way of filling white space with glib attempts to make streamers sit up in their chairs and point excitedly at their screens. I guess you'd have to psychoanalyze me to discover why that should bother me so much, but I'm guessing it points to the hollowness of some of Square Enix's decisions as of late. It's Yuffie's first time in Midgar, and as she navigates the city outskirts, she laments about the stench and the garbage. Later, she'll come to detest the crowds too. Even though I'd played Remake from Cloud's perspective, I guess I bought the idea that I was entering Midgar as a fish out of water this time, even though I knew way more about Midgar than Yuffie did. But I don't think the game works hard enough to stress some of the jarring differences between life as a country mouse and life as a town mouse. Beyond some throwaway comments and a brief bout of motion sickness, Yuffie remains a winner, able to adapt to any scenario or challenge. Yuffie also suffers from the same level 99 armor that Cloud and gang boasted. Especially considering she's a teenager, it would have been nice to see her try and fail a few times. But as it stands, she cuts through everything she meets. But do I like Yuffie as a character? Yes. Sonan is the foil that keeps her ego in check. He has grand designs about getting even with Shinra. He's willing to pay the ultimate price, and he might just have to. Honestly, he's the best of the new characters Square Enix have introduced into the Remake universe. It probably helps that he got me out of a few binds, unlike Leslie, who liked to dump his emotional baggage at my feet in a vapid attempt to tug at my heartstrings, and then Roach, who really made me want to cry. Sonan is a simple man with simple needs. He's not an irritant, he's a protector, and although their time together is brief, he leaves a heavy impression on Yuffie, even if she won't realise it fully straight away. But is he a necessary addition to the FF7 world? 1. Not if you felt it would be more interesting for Yuffie to infiltrate Shinra alone. That's harder to achieve from a writing perspective without having a foil character to bounce off for an extended period. And 2. Not if you felt Yuffie didn't need a revenge backstory. More on that later. The game somewhat sells the idea that all this is happening at the same time as Remake. There are a couple of scenes where famous characters move in and out of shot, and it feels like this DLC belongs as part of that world. However, it would have been more immersive if they had planted seeds within Remake to connect the two games together, i.e. Cloud bumps into someone in a Moogle poncho and they tell you to buzz off, instead of giving you the impression that the DLC was an afterthought, and woven into the exact moments possible in the story that could house an afterthought. I really enjoyed the battle system. Picking back up the reins was challenging after a 27-month hiatus, and I'm not sure I ever fully returned to the level of understanding I'd attained by the end of Remake, but fighting as Yuffie and using the shuriken for long distance and close combat was just fun. As far as music, just like Remake, I really enjoyed the soundtrack. The Yuffie and Wutai theme remixes, Sonan's theme, and the Shinra advanced weaponry music were some of the standouts for me. By the way, it's refreshing to play some FF7 Remake content that doesn't have a fourth wall breaking dimension added to it. The Whispers are nowhere in sight, other than sending a blast of air against you if you try to enter 7th Heaven, which is all well and good I guess because Yuffie is not of legal drinking age. With the absence of my dear friends the Arbiters of Fate, I can actually sit back and enjoy the narrative. I guess I should have known that nothing Yuffie would do in this DLC would be of any consequence, else the Whispers would have been in like a light to correct the course of destiny. So what about the story itself? It's actually a pretty simple tale. Yuffie climbs out of the slums and undertakes a daring robbery on Shinra HQ, and along the way we learn a little more about the conflict between Shinra and Wutai, and the casualties. The story also pits Yuffie and Sonan against Scarlet, whose deadly weapons brought havoc to their island nation. A tale that leads to redemption, loss, and a siege for revenge. Overall, I'm fine with the concept. It reminds me of a heist movie actually. Attempt to steal the unstealable from the big fortified building, something like Ocean's 11. But I don't think the game leans into the heist angle enough. I accept it probably wasn't even trying to, but I think it would have been all the better for it if it had. Think of the great heist movies. There's always that scene where they set up how the hero will break into location. We get a graphical representation or at least a visual checklist and reference points.
This place houses a security system that rivals most nuclear missile silos. First, we have to get within the casino cages, which anybody will tell you takes more than a smile. Next, through these doors, each of which requires a different 6-digit code changed every 12 hours.
The hero will need to perform some daring acrobatics perhaps, or get their timing down to milliseconds in order to avoid security protocols. And of course something will go wrong along the way because that's where the drama comes in, and we'll know it's gone wrong when we deviate from the plan. Plus we have the added bonus that Yuffie and Sonan are ninjas, so this is the perfect time to explore a stealthy infiltration caper perhaps, and really put a stamp on the individuality of this DLC. But what happens instead? Yuffie and Sonan walk right through the front door of Shinra HQ, through a crowd of news reporters and step onto an elevator. That's the infiltration complete. It's kinda laughable how pathetic this is. Of course Scarlet soon joins them in the elevator, immediately cops at their Wutai and locks them into a gauntlet of mechs, mayhem and mundaneness. Did they expect anything less? I guess not when you walk through the front door. I know parts of Shinra Tower are accessible to tourists, but are we really expected to believe that Yuffie and Sonan would expect to walk through the doors wearing that attire, carrying those weapons, and do nothing less than step into Shinra's palm? But I guess that's exactly what they expected, because they are each a one-man army. And even though I had to work for those damn key passes, it still doesn't feel earned in terms of the story. I know what you might be thinking. Cloud and gang did something similar in both Remake and the original game, but Cloud's mission was one born out of desperation and impulse to save Aerith. He's fortunate that he catches Shinra off balance. But Yuffie has crossed the entire world to steal materia from a building. It's not a time-sensitive mission. No one's life is on the line. It's a building in a city she's never ventured to before, so little cinematic planning may have added to the mood and tone of the game. Couldn't we have had a scene back in Sector 7 with Avalanche setting up where they believe the materia to be located based on intel, and we get a well thought out plan to attempt the impossible? I guess Cloud did the whole sneak in on a truck thing, so maybe Yuffie and Sonan pose as window cleaners or maintenance workers, or maybe do it Tom Cruise style and jump from a helicopter. Something that really sets Yuffie apart from the other characters. She's headstrong, impulsive, but gifted. A potent mix of arrogance and naivety could lead a character to try something magnificent, and it's the trying that's important for us visually, even if it fails for the character. Ironically, this was the moment to indulge in the Advent Children acrobatics, if ever there was a time. She'd almost be about to snatch the materia or arrive upon it when she'd make a crucial mistake and spring a trap. She's a child after all, impulsive with room for growth, and that would send us crashing into deep ground. By story's end, Yuffie and Sonan do not complete their goal. The materia does not exist, and Nero kills and drags Sonan into the darkness, likely keeping him warm until his eventual return as a corrupted villain. Or maybe this is one character who will stay gone for good. Square Enix probably waiting to see how the metrics do for Sonan before making a final decision. Considering all that, you could say the story is about failure. Yuffie doesn't get the prize. She escapes from Shinra just in time to see the plate collapse, and is powerless to stop it. Reeve also failed in his attempts to convince President Shinra to abort the plate collapse. Sonan wasn't able to save his sister back in Wutai, but he does save Yuffie, redeeming a failure. However, Yuffie and Sonan do fail to destroy Nero, and of course, the game serves you failure on a hot plate, delivering some frankly cruel endgame boss fights. From failure comes anger, a desire for revenge. The story is merely a vehicle to upload revenge into Yuffie's blood. If it wasn't entirely personal before, it sure is now. Which seems a departure from the original game, where Yuffie was initially played as a pest trying to pilfer your materia, and through the lens of optional side content, you could learn more about Yuffie and give her the chance to inspire her home nation. By the time the credits roll on Intermission, that seems markedly different to the Yuffie and Remake world. Or to look at it another way, can a revenge-fueled Yuffie go back to being that carefree thief who jumped out of trees and led you on Benny Hill-style chases? Was she always that character in the original game, but with revenge hidden under the hood? I'll be interested to see how they pay this off. Will Yuffie be so desperate for revenge that she in effect recruits Cloud into her atmosphere and begs for his help? Or instead, will she be so traumatized from losing Sonan that she'll want to stay working alone for fear of losing someone again, and in effect will be pursuing her? But back to the concept of revenge. It will be up to fans' interpretations whether this is an upgrade in agency for this once optional character. Ultimately, I think the writers felt that making Yuffie a permanent resident in her party requires a primal reason why she would be gallivanting around with Cloud, and collecting and stealing materia, they felt, probably wasn't good enough reason for a character that could no longer be skipped over or left in the background of pivotal moments. For what it's worth, I think that's about the level of change I'd have accepted or been comfortable with for Remake in general, i.e. Sephiroth killing Cloud's mother, Shinra killing Yuffie's protector, expanding Jesse, Wedge and Biggs' roles as long as they still met their quick demise. And if all we'd had to argue about was, did this character need a revenge backstory, did Sephiroth need to kill Cloud's mother to make it personal, which game did it better, etc., I would have accepted that level of change if Square Enix had remained faithful to everything else. But of course, your mileage may vary. Back to Intermission, generally speaking, I'm fine with the story, but the setup feels a little rushed. How the beats unfold seem rushed, and that's symptomatic of the entire game. Within 2 minutes of arriving at Avalanche, the game hits you over the head with all of its side quest content. Here's this thing about Happy Turtle Flyers, here's how you access the VR simulator, and here's the Fort Condor board game. Oh, you mean the Fort Condor game that's apparently so popular, the NPCs only whip it out at set times of the day? I have a theory about this actually. It explains why the boards didn't show up in Remake. What if the delivery of these brand new board games arrived a couple hours after Cloud left Sector 7? And then those board games were all destroyed in the Sector 7 rubble, meaning that we never came across them in Remake. In fact, the Fort Condor boards were the only casualties in the Sector 7 plate collapse. All joking aside, that doesn't bother me too much, but I am curious. Is the board game a cute way of saying, we'll be skipping Fort Condor in the main game? Where does the board game sit contextually within the universe? Has the battle to defend the reactor already taken place? and then someone decided to make a game of Shinra soldiers fighting Shinra soldiers on the mountain, whitewashing the 4 Condor natives or hired guns who were likely brutally slaughtered along the way, and just focused on the Shinra soldiers instead to ensure the game would be mass marketable across Midgar? I guess that would be some cold propaganda. Or will the board game be a case of life imitating art, with Shinra soldiers inspired to take up arms against Fort Condor as a result of these board games? I guess we'll find out in Rebirth if Fort Condor is just a JPEG behind a distant mountain. Meanwhile, down in the Shinra basement, Weiss and Nero have arrived on the scene, dusted off from everyone's favourite PS2 shooter Dirge Cerberus, and now shoehorned into the Remake universe. The problem is they overshadow Sephiroth. Playing the original FF7, my impression of Sephiroth was a sea of failures that led to one monster, one Frankenstein's monster. But now there are too many monsters in the basement, and no one monster is special. Sure, FF worlds are filled with monsters, but there's only room for one horror and his mother in FF7. When you have too many horrors, the odds increase that maybe they'll eat one another instead. The jeopardy nosedives, the apprehension is exhausted. That's why Aliens vs Predator or Freddy vs Jason stops being compelling the moment it leaves a writer's brain and lands on a page. When you have multiple horrors, they can do nothing else but collide. I've laboured this point in my other videos, but ask yourself honestly, when the last time you were afraid of Sephiroth was. Even though Sephiroth is doing new things in Remake, I feel like I haven't wrapped around my finger already. Kitase said Square Enix was afraid of trying to play with Jaws again, but they took out the shark's teeth in the process. My point is, Weiss and Nero further dilute the blood that made Sephiroth special, even if they somehow managed to stay locked beneath Shinra HQ for the rest of the series. Another point I'd like to make, and it's something I touched on in my Remake critique video, Midgar is disappointing. The NPCs have no character, they're mostly athletic and hopeful. Where is the grittiness? I want to see diversity in physique. The challenge, the danger of living in a slum is not realised to me. It's just rubble, a construction site. I want to see grime and desperation, criminals that aren't parodies. Living in a slum means a life of prey and predators, piles of junk creating dark corridors where evil can lurk, rival biker gangs high on their own fumes or drunken alleyways, vigilantes on patrol, lawlessness, yet hope, thriving like a rare flower blooming in the slums. Sector 7 feels like a youth club where everyone goes to hang out during the day for something to do. Kyrie energetically whoops and hollers like she's having the greatest day of her life at all times. The overly comedic Roach stops by and appears suddenly demented.
I'm waiting, my friend! Come out wherever you are!
And yes, I played Remake, so that's saying something. I'm honestly wondering if Cloud gave him brain damage. Maybe that's something I could get on board with as a character plot. Or is this some sort of Mako degradation at play? The problem is I don't believe these characters live in this world. They live in a development room in Japan, in an air-conditioned office with stocked vending machines. The town is too bright, it's jarring seeing it flooded with sunlight, whatever the intentions were with the original game as far as lighting. I think it needs to be dark, lit by twinkling and broken neon signs. The scenes shot at night in Remake are far more acceptable, to my eyes at least. The game aims to be too cute. It's a matter of personal taste, but I think they got the tone wrong. Something interesting to me, at one point Yuffie and Sonan say that they're working with the wrong Avalanche, that the Splinter Cell have the right idea for getting even with Shinra, as opposed to the other Avalanche, who favour a softer and steadier approach. Two roads. That's kind of how I feel about Remake and Final Fantasy VII. One road is darker, leads to more pain and suffering, but in the end it's more exciting. The other road is less clear about what it can achieve or how. There's no immediate plan on how to get to a satisfactory outcome. And there's more paperwork. Or maybe the metaphor needs flipping. Are these our friendly neighbourhood eco-terrorists who blew up the themes of Final Fantasy VII just to get a reaction? Intermission ends by cementing Zack's return to the FF7 universe, for anyone who still had any doubts. The game ushers us towards calm, a familiar and safe environment, but at the same time opens up a new pack of cards and places one on the table. As long as that new card exists, how can we ever say that the original deck is the same? The credits roll and the prevailing question is, does Intermission need to exist? The answer is surely no. The story has served a slim purpose in setting Yuffie's backstory up for arrival in the next main game. Yuffie, a supporting character in Cloud's story, who will be hard pressed to obtain screen time in an already busy plot. A plot already populated by FF7 icons, and sure to be filled with new supporting characters, in the vein of Leslie and Roach. If after playing the original game, the burning question in your mind was what was Yuffie doing a couple days before we met her for the first time, then you got an answer. But was that your burning question? Was it even a question at all? As I turn off Intermission, suckered into over 20 hours of gameplay thanks to its punishing VR simulations, I reflect on the fact that I get a real kick out of these battles. To hear the amazing soundtrack, to move about this world, seeing these nods to characters and locations that I once loved. Searching for something. I'm always searching for something. That feeling I held as a teenager. I can't escape the fact that it's fun, despite the issues I've identified. Something keeps me gripped. Whether that be the remnants of nostalgia, slowly evaporating in the darkest corners of my memories, or perhaps Square Enix's cinematic blend hits certain keys somewhere within my video gaming mind, doing enough just to keep me entertained on some level. It's like returning to my childhood home. Each room takes me back to a place and time. Old friends, old memories, bittersweet. And that's the trap, because you didn't really bring me home, Square Enix. I knew you'd redecorate, but you didn't tell me you'd break through the walls. You didn't tell me it would only feel like home on the outside. Now the longer I stay, the less familiar it seems. And yet here I stand, still watching, still playing, still keeping up to date with information, still being fed by the machine. I can't ignore the mistakes. I'll never ignore how much it hurt, but I find it hard to ignore these games. Yuffie's shuriken spins through the Midgar air. I watch its deadly edges catch the sunlight. I wonder what could have been. I consider what may yet be.